Why is Cardano going to be so much more successful than Ethereum?
The reason I built Cardano was that I looked at all the infrastructures, I looked at their roadmap, and I realized they're trying to chase the wrong markets, they're dealing in the wrong ponds. And well, Ethereum was never built for that. It was built as an experiment that kind of grew into a successful project, and now they're trying to build a safer car. And this is why first mover advantage in technology in many cases is actually a historic disadvantage. Like Google, I think, was the 17th search engine to be commercialized. So there was a lot of failures before Google. There was a monopoly before Google. Yahoo had a huge chunk of the market, and they were very powerful. MySpace had a huge chunk of the market before Facebook came. So usually what happens when you're the first mover is you get a lot of population, but it's unstable, and they're very frustrated with that platform. And you're covered with lots of scars and legacy design decisions and other such things. And as a consequence, you can't, it's like holding sand in your hand. It slips through your fingers, and it's really, really hard to keep your lead.
Will Cardano kill Ethereum? In this video, Charles Hoskinson, one of the founders of Ethereum alongside Vitalik, and now the current founder of Cardano, speaks on if Cardano is going to be the downfall of Ethereum, and if Ethereum, Cardano, and Polkadot can all coexist in the same crypto ecosystem. Also, stick around to the end of the video where we take a look at why the Cardano price is holding well and even hitting all-time highs, whilst all the other cryptocurrencies and Ethereum are getting slaughtered. Also, we speak on how Elon Musk may be involved in the Cardano project. Here's Charles explaining if Polkadot, Cardano, and Ethereum can all coexist and succeed alongside each other. Also, only a tiny percentage of people who watch my videos are actually subscribed. If you enjoy the video, consider subscribing. It's free and you can always change your mind. Enjoy the video.
Well, I've been in the space long enough to watch the top 10 on CoinMarketCap change a lot. I remember Feathercoin and Purecoin and Freycoin and Namecoin and these things. So stuff changes. The only constant is change. So, who knows if it's Polkadot, Ethereum, and Cardano. It does look like we're heading to a Mexican standoff, and, it's going to be a good, the bad, the ugly type of a deal. And we don't know which one's wearing a poncho. But we'll find out what happens. The market will decide that. But I think we have the wrong mentality when we look at things in a sum-zero way. At the end of the day, we have to say, are we solving the problems we set out to solve? And there's two sets of them. One are conceptual, and then the other problems are actual. So the conceptual problems are convincing people that you can run governance, you can run systems in a fundamentally different way. Money is a great example of that. We say, okay, two options. You can have private money or public money. So either have a central bank that a government controls or a bank issues a currency. Both of these have screwed the pooch. There's been over 100 plus years of history in modern central banking and in private banking. We've seen all the way back to the Rothschilds and their gold certificates. In all cases, they just don't work out well. Last year, we printed $6 trillion of money out of thin air to pay for stuff, and they have the audacity to say, I still have to pay taxes. Why? If you're telling me you can print $6 trillion and it's not going to have inflation, why don't you just do that every year and pay for everything? Why not just helicopter money in monetary theory? See, that's the logical inconsistency and the temptation of the printing press. And in private money, look at Tether or these other things. There's a lot of allegations flowing around that maybe they're a fractional reserve, and even if they're not, it's real tempting to be a private business and sit on $25 billion of cash and be like, well, nobody will really know if I take a little bit and maybe invest it in this or do it in that or something like this. That's what the Rothschilds did with their gold certificates. They say, hey, people aren't redeeming these at the rate of issuance, so we could go fractional and nobody would even notice, and look how much money we'd make from that seniorage. Okay, so when you have those types of situations occur, maybe it's better to have a third option. And that's what Bitcoin basically did. It said, this is a deflationary money system, value system. It's like a proto-commodity. It's like digital gold that allows you to build money. And it's not run by a government. It's not run by a bank. It's something new. And I'll keep saying it. Maybe one day it'll happen. We live in two worlds. We live in the developed world and the developing world. In the developing world, they're unbanked for the most part. And despite the fact that they're just as smart as us, they work harder than we do, and they're just as human as you and me, they are shafted because their systems are terrible. They live in capital controls and corrupt governments, and they live in areas where there's not good rule of law, and they don't have stable currencies, and as a consequence, no real good banking infrastructure, no good risk management infrastructure, and so forth. So they can't build wealth of no fault of their own. They lost the geographic lottery. They were just unlucky. Okay, so the point of our technology is to take a step back and say, why don't we just give them a new system? We talk about DeFi. Who's going to be using DeFi? The 25-year-old yield farming kid in New Jersey living in his mom and dad's basement? Or is it going to be the farmer in Ethiopia that's trying to get a fertilizer voucher and can actually, if he gets it, afford to repay you a 15% interest rate? It's going to be the farmer. You see, and that's what gets me up in the morning. And I don't really care if that infrastructure runs on Polkadot or Ethereum or Bitcoin. The reason I built Cardano was that I looked at all the infrastructures, I looked at their roadmap, and I realized they're trying to chase the wrong markets, they're dealing in the wrong ponds, and they're not going to really proactively go to that part of the world and help them out. So if we built Cardano the right way, it would be built in a way that would be maximally beneficial to as many people as possible. So yes, the IBMs can use us, and the Microsofts can use us, and the GMs can use us, and we can do supply chain and, you know, all of these other things. Sure, but that's not the point. What I'm going to do is wake up and direct our commercial efforts, my company's commercial efforts, to Ethiopia and to the country of Georgia and to Southeast Asia and to Mongolia. But it's an open protocol. So as we do that, everybody else gets to use the protocol for their own use and utility. And what's so cool is you can have a merging of two worlds. So they say, well, it creates use and adoption. Would you like 10 million new customers who are under the age of 30, who are highly digitized, with rapidly growing income, who have no brand preferences? Well, of course. So, okay, come on board, build applications for that and so forth. So this is the beautiful thing where we each get to touch the elephant in a different way, and maybe somebody gets the tail and somebody gets the tusk. I am looking at it from one particular mission and viewpoint, but to solve that, I've abstracted it and built a generic framework. And I believe what we've constructed can satisfy the demands of billions of people. And as a consequence, I also believe what we've built will, in the long term, be the most competitive platform for all of these use cases. Because you know what? Whether you build a fair election system in Senegal or you build a fair election system in America, it's the same problem. And if I can make it work for some of the poorest people in the world and bring them a better election system than the one we have in the United States, why don't we go to the US with it after we've demonstrated that it works there? I don't think too much about the day-to-day of Polkadot versus Ethereum versus this, because, you know, it used to be EOS and Tezos. And flip the page, it's going to be Avalanche and F2 next year. And then it'll be something else. It'll be Bobcoin, you know, and okay. What really matters is, do you have laser focus on the vision, the market, and the problems you want to solve? And are you willing to take the risk to be there?
So there's Hoskinson explaining that coins come and go and that he doesn't really concern himself with other projects or where Cardano stands in terms of coin rankings. He is laser focused on solving real world problems, and say what you want about Hoskinson, but you have to admit his heart and passion is in the right place. If you are a Cardano holder, I would feel comforted knowing that he is at the helm of the project. Now, Charles explains why Cardano will outlast and succeed over Ethereum, and why the first mover advantage is actually a huge disadvantage for Ethereum.
That you tend to invent the safety belt after you invent the car. And you don't just proactively say, hey, it's a good idea to put a safety belt in. What happens is you get in a car accident, you go through the windshield, and you're like, boy, we should do something about that. So Ethereum and Bitcoin were much smaller systems in a much smaller economy when they came out. So there was no value at risk. We raised $18 million for Ethereum. We were like, wow, if we can get to $100 million cryptocurrency and get, you know, a few thousand people building cool stuff, it's successful, huzzah. And now it's a $130 billion ecosystem. So there's a fundamental difference between where it began to where it's at. And similarly, when you build the car or the first airplane, you're not thinking at all about safety. You're not thinking at all about these success factors that come, the consequences of success that come. Well, if you build a car today, you don't have the ability to just pretend like history doesn't exist. So you have to do things differently. So the Teslas, for example, they had to adhere to all the safety standards at Ford and GM and these other things, while also innovating and bringing new things to market. So we recognized very early on that there were a lot of issues with consensus design, especially if you plan on scaling, with proof of work in the way that Bitcoin and Ethereum were using it. So we needed a fundamentally different way of doing consensus. And even Vitalik agrees with that, which is why F2 exists, and they're trying to clean this stuff up. But we went beyond that and said the entire development paradigm of how people build dApps, they write smart contracts, this type of stuff, it has to be rethought from a very first principles basis, because it was never built in a way for sustainability. It was never built in a way for resource predictability, because if I'm an application builder, I'd like to have predictable application cost.